In this video, I'd like to talk about our Jet 16-inch planer. What this tool does is it uses a roller and a series of knives to take the rough surface off of a board that has just come from the mill and doesn't have a finished surface to it. So if you look closely at this board right here, you can tell that it's not smooth. This cut edge is smooth because it's been across a saw, but the rest of the surface of the board is very rough. And that's how most lumber comes from the sawmill. Now, by the time it makes it to a place like Lowe's or Home Depot, it's been through a finishing cut and has a smooth surface. But finer woods, if you're going to buy cherry or oak and you want to make something out of it, you may end up getting it from the mill or from a distributor that does not do a finished cut. So you would finish off the surface of that board using this planer. Now, the way that the planer works is there's a big crank here, and that moves the head of the planer up and down, this top part where the motor is. And inside of the machine is a roller, and that roller has 3 wide knives all the way across it. Picture like 3 chisels almost. And that roller spins at a very, very high speed, and it just shaves a little bit off the surface of the board, a little bit at a time. Now, this planer will only take an 1/8 inch of wood at a time. You can't take any more than that, and I recommend you take less. It's a really good idea to just do a little bit at a time with a planer. There are locks to hold this in place. If you were planing a lot of wood and you were worried that when you bumped this handle it might move a little bit, you can lock the head in place. So there's one here, and then there's another one on the back opposite corner, and you would tighten those to keep from being able to adjust this. If you do that, make sure that you loosen them again when you're done. And it's a good idea to tighten those up if you're passing more than one board through, because the vibration of the machine may cause it to change just slightly. There is a measurement guide here on this bar where the crank is, so that you can see how much you're changing the measurement between the head and the table surface. There are in-feed and out-feed rollers to pass the board through, and there is also rollers inside the machine that will grab the board from you and slowly draw it through the machine. So you don't need to force the board through the machine. You will feel the machine grab the board, and once it does that, you let go and you walk around to the outfeed and you catch the board as it comes out. You don't need to pull it out either. Let the machine do the work. Now, one important thing to know about this planer is you cannot pass anything through this planer that is shorter than the distance of the table. So this little example piece that I was showing you, I would never want to pass that through the planer. You should also always pass things through the planer in the direction of the grain. So if you look at this piece of wood very closely, the grain goes this direction, right? So it's even shorter. I couldn't even turn it the long way and pass it through. That's not even long enough anyhow. Please never put any used lumber through this planer. Be careful that you don't put anything that has a screw or a nail or even a staple in this planer. As soon as one of those blades hits one of those staples, and the drum turns so fast that all 3 of them would hit that nail or staple, we have to replace those blades, and it can be costly. If we don't, then it just leaves a little line where that nail broke the surface of the blade. The on-off switch for this planer is here. It's not hard to find. Green turns it on, red turns it off. The planer is also hooked into the vacuum system, which is very important for this. But the planer throws out a lot of wood chips, so the vacuum system will not draw all of them, and you're going to have to sweep up around it when you're done. The last thing I will mention about the planer is that it is very loud. So make sure that you let everyone know that you're getting ready to use it in the shop. You might want to put on ear protection for this tool. It's going to be very loud. Never put your hand inside the planer. That roller is in there, and you could cut your hand. Even if the tool is turned off, if you just swiped your hand across it, it would cut you. Now, the way to plane a board would be, what I typically do is I put the board all the way through the planer with the head high enough up that it goes through with plenty of clearance. And then I start to lower the head until it comes close to the top of the board. Then I pull the board out, I lower it a little bit more, and I set it down until this little black plate in the center here underneath the Jet logo comes right down over the top of the board. Then I pull the board out and I put it just a little bit lower. Sometimes you have to kind of play with it until you get the board to catch the first time. Once it catches the first time and goes through the machine, then you know to just lower it a little bit each and every time you pass it through. And what I tend to do is hold a tape measure. This does go by increments. If one turn is a particular increment, but it's a weird decimal point of an inch, and it's really hard to do the math. And so what I tend to do is just have a tape measure, and I check it, and I run it through again, and I check it, and I run it through again. And like I said, it's best to run things through a little bit at a time. All right, so let's plane down a board and see what that looks like and sounds like. All right, so what I've got here in my hand is a cutoff board. It's the edge of a board. So I've got one smooth side there, you can see. The other three sides are rough. And I'm going to make picture frames out of this, which I'll do in a later video to demonstrate that process on the table saw. But before I go cutting the profile on the table saw and mitering it to make my frame, I want to smooth this out. It's easier to do it when it's all in one piece. So I'm going to start this process by passing this through the planer. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the planer head up a bit, and I'm going to put this board through the planer and just gently set the head back down kind of close. And I'll feel it stop. Okay, and so now I can push it through, but I can't pull it out. If I go a little further, I can't do anything, right? So I know now that the machinery inside of the head is grabbing a hold of this board. So I'm going to raise it up a bit so that I can move it. I'm going to pull that out of there, and then I'll just drop it down again just a little bit. And that should grab the board and draw it through. If it doesn't, I'll tweak it a little bit when I get started. So let me get my safety gear on and turn on the vacuum, and we'll go ahead and run this through. One other important consideration regarding the planer. If for some reason you should find a piece of wood that's tapered, like this piece of wood is much wider at one end than it is at the other, you can still run this through the planer, although I would recommend trying to true it up some other way like the table saw first. But what you would do is run it through at the widest end first. Now, the thing about that is it will take forever because it'll slowly plane off the angle. The table is parallel to the head, so it's always making a board that is the same thickness from end to end. So now I could run this through with the taper on the side and plane it the way that it is, no problem, because this edge does not taper. But the part that's tapered, I can't run through the planer. And make sure that you never put it small end first. If you put the small end in, it acts as a wedge, and it's liable to break the planer or at least stall it out. This is another one of those tools that I recommend you come and talk to me before you use it. It's not an exceptionally complicated tool, but there is some damage you could do if you use it wrong. So please come talk to me first, but you've got a basic overview now of how it works. Here we have a couple other kind of planers. These are both hand planers. We have this traditional hand planer, people powered. This is like something you'd see at old Colonial Williamsburg. People still use them. And this is a powered door planer, handheld powered door planer. Both can come in handy. Both of these are basically used for edge planing. You couldn't do anything very wide. You'd only be able to do a board that was as wide as the blade that's in the planer. So mostly this is for truing up the edge of a board, which I'm going to demonstrate here with this rough piece of wood that we were looking at earlier. It has a pretty rough edge on both sides, and so I'm going to plane that and smooth that up to show you how both of these work. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is clamp my workpiece in the table vise here. And you can see how rough that is. This planer is two-handed, so got that grip right there, like that. This is your front hand, and you're working it like this. So you try to get it nice and flat before you start. And you can see I've already got a much smoother edge on that board. Don't ever drop this planer. I think if you dropped it once, it would probably be relatively worthless. And there's where the chisel is underneath. So it's okay to set it down on a wood surface. Don't ever set it down on anything rough like the concrete floor or anything like that. So here's the Makita door planer. It's a similar tool. It's got the same kind of grip as the other hand planer, except it's powered. So it has a trigger, and then it also has a stay on button, so you can lock it in the on position. I don't recommend doing that because there's not much of a safety under here. And if you locked it in the on position and your hand touched that, it's going to tear you up. Now it does have this little safety mechanism here, which means that you can set it down and it's fine. It's not touching, the blade isn't touching the table. So that's nifty, and it'll get out of your way if you're planing something and then go back into position. There is an adjustment knob here for depth of cut that goes all the way from 3/32 back to 0. So, and this is where the wood chips eject out of here. So be aware of that whenever you're using this, it's going to shoot wood chips out of that hole right there. Alrighty, let's go ahead and demo this. So again, keep it as flat as possible and pass it across the thing that you want to smooth out the rough edge. Now, as you can see, that one works a heck of a lot faster than the hand planer. It can chip the one edge sometimes. You have to be careful of that and be aware of that. It is just something that door planers do. One last thing to note, door planer, belt sander. Similar looking, not the same tool at all. Make sure that you know which one you should be using for what. They do very similar things. I'll demo the belt sander and the other hand sanders in a different video.